Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the official podcast of the Concrete Industry Board of New York City. I'm today's host, Eli Gottlieb, president of the CIB and a structural engineer who spent my career trying to figure out how to keep the Skyline standing. For over 70 years, the CIB has been the heartbeat of New York City's concrete industry. We bring together developers, engineers, contractors, ready-mix producers, and testing labs who make the impossible happen every day. But we realize something: the best conversations don't always happen in the boardrooms or the press releases. They happen in the job trailers, on the deck at 6 a.m., or over a drink after a massive 12-hour pour. And that's exactly what this podcast is. We're stripping away the corporate talk and sitting down with the legends, the innovators, and the pros who are actually putting the work in place. We're talking war stories, green tech, logistics, and what it really takes to build in the toughest, greatest city in the world. So whether you're a 30-year industry vet, an intern stepping into your first site, grab your coffee and let's get into it. Today, I'm joined by Fortunato Orlando, who brings over 30 years of world-class structural engineering experience to the U.S. After starting his career in Italy, he joined Severed Associates in 1996 and never looked back. And since then, he has engineered some of the city's most complex and iconic structures, including the Bank of America Tower at 1 Bryant Park, the air train at JFK, and the groundbreaking super tall 270 Park Avenue. A passionate advocate for sustainable concrete and green building, Fortunato is also currently the second vice president of the CIB and an active leader with the Structural Engineering Association of New York and a leading voice on the future of our industry.
Thank you, Eli, for the introduction.
It's great to have you here today, Fortunato.
My pleasure.
You started your career in Italy before coming to New York. What was the biggest cultural shock of your first New York concrete job?
Good question. One thing that really shocked me was the speed of the construction. Any flat plate buildings that I worked on, they have a cycle of 3 days. So each floor was built in 3 days. Things that we are not doing in Italy. It takes much longer. Shoring, reshoring, stripping the form after a few hours that the pour is complete has been something that really impressed me a lot. And technology pretty much is the same. Math and physics is the same. So that was something very impressive for me. Speed.
I think the speed is one of those things that the New York concrete industry does like nobody else. In all my work in other places in the world, there's nowhere else that I've experienced doing 2-day cycles, 3-day or even 2-day cycles.
Yes.
And that's something that's very specific to New York. And I think it drives the technology, as you're saying, too. Yeah. Like because the cements we're using, the concrete that we're using here, the way that we're approaching form work and reshoring and things is a little bit different because of that speed.
Yes,
that we're working in here.
And for instance, for the big core with the Sun Skyscraper, and right now they have all the surprising forms and things that we didn't have at that time in Italy. So when we did 1 Bryant Park, one of the first things I said, oh my gosh, this is very impressive, the way that they were proceeding. The speed was amazing. Yes, yeah. Because the speed, have you encountered any problems during the construction?
It's a real challenge. I mean, on job sites, in my experience, when you're working at that speed, everybody's got to be working as such a tight team, from the engineering team down to the lathers, down to the concrete foreman and all the placement that's going on the job. Everybody has got to be doing their piece in exactly the right order, making sure that all the right QA/QC and checks are done in place, so that there's no hiccup in that pour, because at that speed, you don't have time for something to go wrong and then somebody to go back and figure it out. You got to be on top of it at that moment in the field, keeping things running. And I think that's a challenge on jobs. It's a stressful part of a job in a lot of ways, but it's also, when you get it running, it feels great. And everybody can be such an amazing team here in New York. And I think that's one of the things that I love on a job site is when you've got that team working together like that.
Yeah. For me, again, because I was always amazed by the speed, also has been a little bit of negative experience, because in one of the jobs that I was working on, they were stripping a little too fast. The concrete was not yet set. And because they just cast a big shear wall next to it, when they stripped it, the floor started to sag. Okay, the shear wall was leaning. And that was one of the phone calls that you don't want to receive. That you are sitting, doing everything, and somebody calls you and says, we have a problem on site. So you have to leave everything, run over there, and then, the POP goes over there. But thank God it was just a single accident, no people injured or anything else. It was just time because you had to demo everything and rebuild it. Did you have anything of similar?
There's been lots of individual things that have happened on job sites. Something stripped a little too early, a little excessive deflection, a couple of missed bars here and there,
Okay.
that we've fixed for. And there's been plenty of cases where we've stripped the forms and found, significant honeycombing on a project,
Yes.
right? Which can be a
Yes.
real problem. What I found is that for the most part on almost all my concrete jobs, very few of them were like the phone call in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
They've all been things that we can kind of work through. And I think some of the worst of them were some of the honeycombing. I got a call from a job and they said, "Oh, we got cracking going on. You got to get down here and look at it." And this was early in my career. I was 2 years into working. It was 1998, and I was working with Charlie Thornton. And he said, "No problem. I'm going to go to the job site with you. But if it didn't crack, it's not concrete. So we're going to be able to figure it out. And if we're going to find a solution, it's going to be okay." And we got down there. Lo and behold, 2 huge concrete wing beams supporting a stadium.
You don't want to see
The
that.
concrete had not gotten through. It was a dense rebar grid, and the concrete hadn't gotten through any of the front rebar grid, and it was massive voids on the interior of it. We had to shore things up, pressure grout it, repair it, and then go on. So it was like, the one nice thing is like, even if you have a little bit of a hiccup, almost everything's always been, there's been a way to fix it. And working with the team, we've always found a way to keep the job moving without having to backtrack too much, because backtracking is always such so much heartache when that happens on a job site, where if you can just sort of figure out how to keep going and repair the condition, figure out a solution to it.
That's one of the things that I believe is extremely important when you have a good team on a project, from contractor, CM or GC, and all the subcontractor, that they work together, because anytime that there is a problem, you are able to find a quick solution. Teamwork always is the best solution for everything. Yeah, it's important, very, very, very important. Yes.
So thinking about, complex projects, the headaches in the middle of the night, with New York City lots getting smaller, and, are the logistics in New York getting more difficult than they were before? Or have you, from your experiences, like the kinds of things that you're dealing with, the kinds of struggles you're getting today, are they more challenging than they were, or are they just different challenges than you experienced previously?
Well, from what I've seen, logistically, even that the lots, they get smaller and smaller. Sometimes you are bounded on 3 sides by existing buildings. So you need, sometimes you need, to put support of excavation, or if you undermine something, you gotta shore it or anything like that. I think that the technology is there, but who pay the consequences for these things usually are the New Yorkers, because you have a sidewalk on the street, a side shed on the street, and they close the sidewalk, so you have to go around the street that sometimes are 2 lanes, they narrow to 1. so that's for me one of the things that we learn how to live with. Okay, so all the logistic to put together a building, because sometimes you need space for material. When the concrete trucks come and the pump is there, and they close the street completely, and everybody has to go around. So people get upset, but
that's the nature of construction in New York. I think that's been the nature of construction in New York my whole career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One of my early jobs was 7 Times Square.
Yes.
Which is right in the middle of Times Square. Subways on 3 sides, the subway station on the 4th side. Subway station had to remain open during construction.
Absolutely.
Subways had to remain operational. And they were doing work on the subways while we were building it. So we had 60 feet of access to our site while we were building the job. And that job to me was really an eye-opener, because it was about working with existing buildings, existing structure, things that had to remain operational, the MTA and New York City Transit and the subway system, which is like we were actually within 6 inches of it in most places. And then we had to re-support some of the existing station, which was dated back to some of the structure dated back to 1890 and had to be incorporated into our new building.
Correct.
And it was just like the challenges, the logistical challenges of the site, the logistical challenges of how you did that construction and how we, cast concrete underneath the MTA around these existing columns up through the subway station to carry, at those columns were about 35,000 kip columns, each column. So they were
Massive.
big columns, right?
Yes.
And we had 10 KSI concrete at that point,
time.
but we,
Yep.
we didn't have 12, 14, and now 16 KSI concrete that you're working with today. So it was a real challenge just dimensionally to fit it all in there. But I think that was an eye-opener about creative solutions to a project in those logistics confines of how do you work around, existing structure? How do you work around subways and keeping things operational? And we actually built that mining underneath the buildings. Urban Construction was the foundation contractors, and they were just incredible on that project. And the technology that came out of that, how we approached that job, in many ways, for us or for me, led directly to how we found solutions at the Hudson Yards to build there around the entire Long Island Railroad system to be able to support the towers there and build very close to all those operational facilities that needed to be there, whether it was the substations, the tracks, and things. Do you feel like there were things like that you worked on earlier in your career that really set you up for 270 Park and the challenges of 270?
Absolutely, because I work on 3 Times Square, just across 7, a little bit on the left side, on the west side, and then on 1 Bryant Park. They both are on 42nd Street with multiple subway line crossing the site, and we have to keep everything functioning. Okay, everything has to stay. All the train needs to run at the same time. They need to be safe. Okay, so the technology, like you mentioned, with all the monitoring and because the vibration during excavation, because it was 60-ton rock for 1 Bryant Park. So, and we had to maintain the facade of the theater in place because it is a landmark. So you learn as you go. So we did 3 Times Square and we learned something that we applied to 1 Bryant Park. And then from 1 Bryant Park, we went to 270. That was extremely challenging. One thing that I learned on all this project was dealing with the authority, the public authority, like Metro North, MTA, the Port Authority, and that being public authority, they think a little bit different from us. Okay,
they have a different set of challenges that they're trying to meet as well, like a different set of responsibilities.
Absolutely, and nobody dispute that. And sometimes for us, that everything is quick. Okay, we feel like that they are slowing us down. So that's one thing that I noticed on all the project. But at the end, very cooperative, excellent people, and they put us in our spot. Okay, so say, okay, calm down, don't go too fast, think about this, think about that. For 270, that was the most challenging part because we didn't have too much point to land the building, and we had to be in between tracks of all the Metro North trains. And again, being a super tall, we had a couple of columns that had 100,000 kips. So all the material that we had available, they were not good enough because we had to stay within 4 feet the dynamic envelope of the train. So there were all the rest of the team came in play, from concrete producer, concrete contractor, testing agency, the CM, okay, because we had basically to, I'm not saying invent a new product, a new material, but study a new material. So that's where we start to test hundreds of different mix. It took about 14 months before we reached a design mix that was above the 14,000 that now is common in New York. The team basically called 16,000, but we reached capacity much higher than that, an average of 20 with peaks of 23,000 PSI. And that was the major challenge for a building that tall in over rails, basically, actual train that they were working every day, similar to what you did at Hudson Yards, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, Hudson Yards and working between the train envelopes, the dynamic envelopes, and being able to install the construction on off-hour shifts in between, train movements where you had 3 hours in the afternoon or maybe 6 hours overnight to be able to work is very challenging. And there we similarly, our foundation elements on that project were really pushing the limits on what we'd done previously. And there we used 14 KSI concrete. It's a little before 270. We had it a few years earlier. And we were using 14 KSI. I think it was one of the first major installations of 14 KSI for deep foundation elements of that magnitude, and that number of them going into the city. But we had columns similarly. Our columns were 65 to 80,000 kip columns and had to sit on, we had 2 feet in between, 2 to 3 feet between the dynamic envelope. So some of those columns are steel columns instead of concrete columns because it's much narrower, but the foundations that they're sitting on, we had a little bit more space where we could spread to 4 feet. And so we could get, 14 KSI caissons and foundation elements and pile caps in to be able to support that. And that was incredibly challenging to fit in there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can see that. Oh, you introduced me. I never had a chance to introduce you. So let me spend 2 words for Eli, that is a true visionary in the structural engineering world and a recognized leader in our practice. You are a partner here at Thornton Tomasetti for a while already. And he is the mastermind behind some of the most technical and creative projects across the globe. If you ever walked across the massive 10-acre of the platform supporting the Manhattan Hudson Yard that we were just mentioning, our active rail line, or the marvel and incredible movable structure of the shed, you have experienced Eli's work firsthand. And with a portfolio that spanned from 7 and 11 Times Square at the Orchard, beautiful concrete building, and other major hospital and arenas across the country, Eli's is known for bringing fresh, outside-the-box thinking at the hardest engineering challenge. Was I exaggerating? No.
Thank you, Fortunato. I appreciate that. It's very kind words.
So what else do you... We're talking about concrete. So how do you see where can we go pushing the envelope for the concrete? Since we mentioned that we think out of the box and we push the envelope all the time. So
I think there's a number of things that are happening already in New York, and I'd love to see them continue. You mentioned 11 Times Square. 11 Times Square, we did that back in 2008. So it's it was a little while ago now, but that was the first concrete core first tower in New York that's been done for a commercial office building. And that was really groundbreaking here in New York to do that. And since then, it's only been done a couple more times. But I think that's an approach to construction that was really, really successful. Sabaro was a great partner in executing that project. And the idea of being able to put up the concrete core first and then follow it with the steel structure for a commercial office building is something that gets done outside of New York, but not very often here. Mm-hmm. And I think that the idea of being able to do that more and do it better is something that I would love to see happen in New York, because I think there's incredible benefits to being able to get that system up and running, simplifying, the integration and simplifying some of the construction and allowing the concrete industry to be really at the front of building, some of the tallest buildings in the world here would be great. So that's one piece of it. And I think the other piece that's coming is post-tensioning work. Yes. Post-tensioning doesn't happen a lot in New York, but we've done a few. Like we've dabbled in it for special conditions and things like that. I did post-tension transfer shear walls for Geffen Hall. You did some really incredible post-tension girders for the theater project in Times Square.
Correct. When we lifted the theater 40 feet from the ground, we had to post-tension this 24 feet deep concrete girder. But the first 8 feet were just a formwork. to support
Towards the rest of it.
to support the real post-tensioning. I agree with you because post-tensioning has a lot of potential. Also from a green point of view, right? Because
so much less
we
material.
can reduce the slab thickness and make sure that we don't use too much cement. You and I, we both are together in the committee for the green concrete guidelines for the moment. Hopefully soon will become a specification. Okay, we spent a couple of years putting together some great numbers that hopefully will prove correct and we can use in our industry. But yeah, post-tensioning definitely will help with the carbon footprint.
Yeah, it's lower amounts of concrete volume, simpler reinforcement on the jobs, which would make things potentially, in some ways faster to build. In some ways, one of the challenges in New York is that speed. Is post-tensioning usually takes just a little bit more time than the 2-day cycle that we're able to do with conventional reinforcement. So there's an interesting challenge there in the construction speed in New York, but I see some real benefits to it. Mm-hmm. We're just finishing the Rolex Tower at 53rd Street that also has a significant amount of post-tensioning in it and as well. And I think that it unlocks a lot of possibilities, and it's releasing a lot of design options for more challenging structures and more innovative structures and things with post-tensioning. So I think that there's a real future in that in the city as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we as a CIB need to push a little bit more and involve the concrete contractors, because they like to do what they have done for 30 years, right?
Well, it's efficient. There's really good reasons for that, right? They got it down. It's efficient. We can do it successfully. We can do it on a 2-day cycle.
Right.
But
I don't find the client opposing and then say, oh, when we bid the job, the price goes skyrocketing because sometimes we have to bring people from outside. Okay. So for residential, it's extremely valuable. For office building, a little less, because they, post-tensioning, you cannot cut the convenience there wherever you want. You have the
But there are solutions to that.
Of course there are.
We're doing a couple of post-tensioned commercial office buildings. We've got one hopefully going into construction shortly here in New York. And, we structured it so that there were spaces where you could cut out for the stairs, but you
have to pre-plan.
You pre-plan just a little bit. So you give a lot of flexibility, but you bound the flexibility. Just like in a lot of buildings, you would still not cut out the beam.
Sure.
If you could avoid it.
Sure.
Right. If you could avoid it. So I feel like it's,
yeah.
I think it can be managed. I think that's one of the things about changing the perceptions. I remember starting out, people saying, when you're building in concrete, it's flexible up until the day it's poured.
Mm-hmm.
And then in steel, it's flexible after it's poured because, you can always come back and change it. And you can easily get to it. But I feel like with concrete, with the right planning and the right approaches, concrete can be flexible afterwards too.